driving, and today the long arm of the furious law is coming for justice and vengeance because I'm in this, the only surviving Metropolitan Police Series 1 Rover P6 area car. So a very, very happy day for a P6 enthusiast like myself to be roaming around in this wonderful piece of automotive history. I see the wipers are just as bad on this as they are on mine. And this car in fact replaced a near identical sister car which ended its days somewhat prematurely in an on-duty incident. As an aside, these are meant to be two-speed wipers with an intermittent function, but the intermittent function works on a vacuum system and that always perishes and leaves you with no automatic wipers, and also the turning off just turns off wherever you sit them, because so you have to do it manually. So this car worked under the call sign VD, amusingly, and was based out of Kingston in South London, where it served until apparently, we believe, 1973. And in that time, who knows how many shouts it attended, how many cars it pulled over. We do know that it was involved in an incident at some point in the early 70s, I think 1971, when it had to have a new front bumper and front wing put onto it after a minor tinkle. Oh, this thing drives beautifully. The Buick-derived V8 3.5 litre was Rover's hallmark for many, many years, and it was the thing that kept the police coming back to Rovers all the way into the 1980s. Apart from sounding glorious, it is an amazing sounding engine. It just pulls and pulls with a wave of torque, but the torque for a relatively light car like this is just immense. So these things were properly fast. The 2-litre 4 cylinders would do 100 miles an hour. These things would do way more than that. Let's have a quick look around the outside of this thing and show you the police equipment on this, which is surprisingly minimal. So it's no secret that the police in Britain loved the Rover P6 back in the 60s and the 70s. Bang for buck, there is really nothing like it. The old wives' tale is that it was the only car that could keep up with the stolen Jaguar 3.8s that the police could afford. And with the Buick 3.5 litre V8 under the bonnet, it was one of the fastest, most powerful, and certainly the most distinctive sounding vehicles on British roads at the time. And there is loads of baseless and apparently apocryphal talk that the police workshops did secret things to these cars to make them go faster and handle better and outmaneuver the criminals. But the fact is, they really didn't. All they did to them was add in the two-tone horns, and incredibly and anachronistically in 69, 68, even into the 1970s, a Winkworth bell tucked in, squeezed in amongst the V8 engine. And of course the spotlights on the roof and the blue light in the middle. The only thing mechanically they did to it was uprated anti-roll bar in the front, which gives it a little less roll in the corners, but not that much less roll, to be perfectly honest. So in fact, Rover did a good enough job out the box to give this car the handling, the performance it needed in order to do the job that the police required. There are a few little things though that were police specific which they found. Back in the day, if you were to look through the window of any police Rover V8, it would have been an automatic rather than the manual S. That was because the S used a ever so slightly uprated version of the 4 cylinders 4-speed gearbox, and it just wasn't up to the job. And the V8, when it was being pushed really hard by the police, it would just explode. So they stuck with the automatic. However, there was a little alteration they did to that, to the top of it, where you've got drive 2, 1 for low gears. Because so many of the police drivers were used to driving manuals, what they did, they blanked off the 2 and the 1 low ratios to stop them slamming it back into first by mistake and grenading the gearbox, which did happen a couple of times. We've heard from ex-serving police officers back in the day. One car like this, not this car, but very similar to it, was trailered back to the garage with no gearbox in it, apparently, after the Borgwarn had actually exploded, having gone into first at over 100 miles an hour. This, of course, is a Series 1 car, and you can tell that because it doesn't have any side decoration. The later cars, the Series 2s, as well as the egg crate grille and the risers in the bonnet, the little kind of rocker cover echoes, had the stainless steel strips. This is a Series 1. It's also got the Series 1 wheel trims, which are another notably famous thing that the police suffered with because they were cornering and accelerating so much harder than your average Joe Public person. These would spin and decapitate the air fillers, so your tyres would go down in short order, and that would be the end of your police chase. Now, the thing about the P6 is it's already a fabulous looking car. I mean, the design work by David Bash, or Bash, however you want to pronounce that, was exquisite. And it's interesting how the police equipment just seems to emphasise its cool, sleek lines and this Corsica blue paint, because this Corsica blue is a factory colour, but it became synonymous with the Met. It just emphasises these lovely straight lines, this one single line which starts here or ends here at the peak of the rear wing fin, carries on through this curve, this extra curve, but like on a Land Rover Defender. It carries on into the front wing, across there, and truncates, or begins, at the little parking tip on the sideline. What a beautiful, wonderful, cohesive piece of design. David Bash did spend a lot of time in America looking at American designs in the 1960s and late 50s, and this is what he came up with. Another quick clue to the fact it's a Series 1 is, of course, the separate door handle and push button. The Series 2s, this is kind of integrated into one unit, which looked a little bit neater. Now let's climb inside the P6 and see what the police got in the late 60s. Now, we've got the standard fake wood trim at the top of the door, the standard padded vinyl. This was very, very advanced, very modern, very exciting back in the late 60s when you saw one of these cars. It was still incredibly cool. This was one of the coolest cars on the road. You've got the lovely stainless steel door sill protectors, and of course the very, very wide transmission tunnel because it's a V8. Now you notice two things about these seats. First of all, they are, well, in fact, three things. They are the slim flat pleat of the Series 1. Secondly, there is no headrest. And thirdly, these are leather. The police were still getting leather at this point. They deleted this. When leather became a cost option with the Series 2, they went to the box pleat fabric rather than the leather. That saved them about £15 a car. Climbing aboard, you will see the huge P6 steering wheel, because not all P6s had power steering. This one does, and you appreciate it, but it's not essential on a P6 because it can be driven quite happily without. We have the 3500 logo across the centre there, and we've got the strip speedo. Now, this was still in the period when the V8s had the strip speedo as standard. Later on, when they went to the Series 2, it became the needle dial, but the police found the needle dial wasn't quite as accurate as the old strip speedo, so they did try to either persuade Rover to fit strip speedos in or retrofit themselves from old cars, the strip speedos, into needle dial cars, but it didn't work. Now, broadly, this is still very much a standard P6. We've got our upper T-shelf area here with a padded thing with the Kienzl clock. The German item is the least reliable thing in the car. You never find a Kienzl clock which is telling the right time. Oh my goodness, it almost is. That's unheard of. It must have been set this morning. We have a large T-shelf, ideal for taking your refs from your sandwiches, and your cup of tea can sit up there quite happily. We have information about the car's call number for the radio just there. And we've got the only really obvious piece of police equipment here in the interior. We've got Pi transistor radio tel phone just here, with a loudspeaker just here. If you recall the Wolseley police car we did a little while ago, this had a very similar unit in it from about a decade and a half previously. Now I'll just move these keys out of the way so you can see the additional switches. Normally on a P6 this is an open storage area, but here we've got a blanking plate in between the heater controls. So we've got controls for all of the extra lights, the horns, the sirens, the bell, blue, gong. But interestingly, it's not printed or done particularly professionally. It's done with a Dymo tape, these old press things that push the letters through from the back, and everyone's grandparents seemed to have one in the old days back in the 80s and the 70s who could make little labels to put on things, and that's what the police did. You'd think it'd be more professional than that, but there you go. Looking around the rest of the car though, the only other little clue that we're in a police car is the second mirror for the observer. In the back of it, no special locks, no special screens, no anything, just a truncheon and a hat. Now this is genuine Metropolitan Police archive equipment, but not from this car. This is actually from a different Rover 3.5 litre. This is from the SD1 in the Liver Run film. So somewhere inside here, I'm not sure I can show you this, if it's classified or not, is the details of the Liver Run. Now today we get a special treat because we don't get one horn test, we get 3. That's an aggressive fuel pump in there. First, a standard horn test. Oh, that's a single tone, a monotone parp. I wonder if they took one out in order to make it have room for the other equipment. It's been deparped. Secondly, we've got the gong. Oh, Camberwick, Green and Trumpton are coming to arrest you. Be very, very scared. And now the proper one. That one means you're in serious trouble. These cars were firm favourites of police drivers because the P6 was such an incredibly good handling car. The power of the V8 engine, plus you had the amazing handling with the Dion rear suspension keeping the back axle perfectly planted at all times, and the front suspension with its incredibly long travel meant the car would lean through a corner but grip with incredible, well, safety, reliability, assuredness that you were going to get around the other side. And so the police could really go after pretty much anyone and no faster than pretty much anything else on the road, and nothing else really stood a chance in terms of a pursuit. And when it came to things going a bit sideways, these were about the safest car in the world in the late 1960s. Ralph Nader, who wrote the book Unsafe as Any Speed and pretty much killed the Corvair, he called this the safest car in the world, and he was not badly informed. It's one of the first cars to have crash protection knee pads, collapsible crush zones in the front of the bodywork, inertia reel seat belts, bucket seats that are designed to hold you in place, and a shell around you that's designed to keep you safe and not deform, while the rest of the car further away does to absorb the impact. So all round, it was the perfect police car. Now you might be thinking, it's a curious choice of colour to paint it a dark blue. Don't you want the police car to be visible? And with just that little tiny blue light on the roof, it's not perhaps the most obvious thing in the world. But apparently the police drivers liked it because they could shut all the lights off, sneak up on someone they wanted to make an arrest on, and be virtually unseen, just tickle over on the V8, just whispering away in the dark, and bang, when you get there, lights on, sirens on, and you've come out of nowhere, a sneak attack, if you will. Oh, do you know what? Driving a P6 V8 for my job would be one of the greatest treats ever. Never mind what the job actually is, just turning up and being given the keys to one of these on a daily basis would be amazing. Wonderful. What a rush. The sound of a P6 V8 is just like nothing else. And the controls are so well laid out. You'd think the steering wheel is so thin it's going to be uncomfortable, but it's actually really nice. It's got little knurled ridges on the back that make it very nice indeed to hold. And it just sits nicely in your lap. It's a little bit close to your legs. But the twin, very slim control stalks are just perfectly right for your fingers. So you've got your headlight main beam on the left, indicators and horn on the right. Again, texture on the back so you can feel them and manoeuvre them. It's just a wonderfully thought out car. And that graceful curve of the dashboard into the door on the left is pure 1960s modernity, modern design of that decade. It's wonderful. Interestingly, for the quarter lights, on the Series 2 you get the turning wheel to undo it. On this one, a little control latch to release it. There we go, pitch into the corner, it leans, but it sticks like crazy. Now I had a Rover 2000 when I was 17, and I have to admit I wasn't always perfectly behaved. But even back then, the only time I ever got the back end of that car to break loose was on ice. These things are so well planted. This was a car that was designed entirely by engineers who were determined to build the best car they possibly could, regardless of financial constraint. And it really does show. It's incredible to think this car is, what, 56 years old, 55, 56? And it just starts on the button, it purrs like a kitten, and it's fabulous. So thank you for watching. I do hope you've enjoyed this ride out and this look at this incredible, unique Survivor, the last of its breed, the last of its kind. If you have, please, as always, hit like and of course subscribe, and join us again next time driving something else completely different.